This is Revelations.Unveiled. Detroit. Dwayne Wade and the Transgender Travesty, a transitioner's testimony, Part 2. As he was wheeled into the operating room and was surrounded by medical staff, surgical equipments, and lights, Fitz fears mounted. I started to ask questions like, what's that? And who is this? He said. No one answered him. Right before the anesthesia drugs took effect and he became unconscious, as they had already inserted the needle in his arm, he remembered saying, "Stop!" The surgical aftermath. When he finally came to, he was Looney Tunes all day because the drugs, he was in an enormous amount of pain. When the bandage dressing came off a few days later, he could see this was a radical change. Contrary to their promises, he was shocked to find that he looked quite different. And when I went to my doctor for a follow-up, the doctor was gleeful, celebrating the surgery as a wonderful metamorphosis, Fitz said. Because his appointments were always relatively short, approximately 15 minutes, he never got to say much. Fitz described himself during his early years as a party kid and a serial one-night stander, never having had many close long-term relationships. Fueling his thinking that his decision to transition was the right thing to do was the political environment of the day. Radical change was in the air, he remembers, sensing at the time. The Occupy Wall Street movement was making noise around the country, and the Arab Spring was underway. I had this feeling that the world was changing. People were also talking that in 2012 the world was going to end, he said. A lot of revolution. So let's charge forward. But I was behaving in a short-sighted way. There were several times he would go to bed with someone, and as a passable woman, his female partner would be surprised to find he had male genitals. Fitz now regrets not being honest about that. He teased men sexually, but was afraid of them, and never put himself in scenarios where he would be alone with men or slept with men. Sometimes he would engage in prolonged kissing with men, he said. But after surgery, sex was all but impossible. I didn't have my genitals. No, I didn't hate my genitals, he says, but they looked strange, weird. My scrotum looked like a deflated balloon, like the weird thing that hangs off a chicken's neck. It's lifeless, an empty sack, he said. He did not have sex for approximately 1 year. But then I had sex because I wanted to have sex, and I discovered that I was ejaculating blood, he said. On one particular occasion, when he was with a woman, he became sexually aroused and had a premature ejaculation, and it was bloody. The journal confirmed with an endocrinologist that this is indeed possible after the orchiectomy. That scared me. So I went back to my doctor and said, I don't know. This shouldn't happen. We'll run all kinds of tests, Fitz said. They ran tests. and it took several weeks to get the results. He was then advised to wait it out, get a different desk chair, and stop riding his bicycle. Fitz took all those steps, but nothing helped. As doubts about what he had undergone began to set in, he thought the problem might be that he needed better, more expensive doctors. For that he would need a higher salary. So he decided to learn to code and write software. By the end of 2014, he got hired as a software engineer. With better health coverage, he thought he'd be able to see any doctor he wanted. At his last appointment at the gender clinic, he received a message along the lines of, "Oh, by the way, your last blood test indicated that some of your levels are low, and we need you to start taking prescription level vitamin D and calcium." When Fitz asked if this was a temporary prescription, he was told that it was not, that it would probably be for the rest of his life. When he pressed the staff further, he was told that it was as a result of the surgery. "The surgery was supposed to make me healthier," he replied. "Why would I now need to take prescription vitamins?" The reason was that he was no longer producing the necessary hormones needed to maintain adequate bone density. Fitz said he kept asking questions, but before he knew it, his 15-minute appointment was over and he had to leave. Increasingly concerned, he started asking for his medical records and began reviewing them carefully. He also asked for the letter he was asked to get signed from a urologist so he could go forward with the surgery. The letter said that Fitz was of sound mind and was in good physical health, exceeded the standards of care set forth in the current guidelines from the World Professional Association for Transgender Health. For the first time, Fitz looked up the WPATH standards of care, which stipulate that before hormonal treatments begin, patients are supposed to have a psychological evaluation. Fitz maintains he never had one. Prior to surgery, he was supposed to, according to the guidelines, have 2 more evaluations. Fitz says he never had those either. Upon closer review of his medical records, which he shared with the journal, he realized that the doctor had taken notes of his thoughts, but had never noted any of Fitz's concerns about what the drugs might do to his liver or bladder. Irked by this bias, he began researching his doctor's background and discovered that his doctor was actually a trans-identifying woman who presented as a man. All these years he thought he had been discussing his distinctly male health issues with a man. "I felt horribly betrayed," Fitz told the journal. "There's an intimate level of appreciation for your genitals, and if you're not even the same sex, you can't fully understand that. Just as I have no idea what it's like to menstruate or ovulate, because obviously I can't." Fitz also discovered that the doctor was a clinical activist, and when she was not working at the gender clinic, she was giving slideshow presentations at various meetings with other doctors for more gate opening. This doctor called herself a gate opener as opposed to a gatekeeper. Determined to get some answers, he scheduled yet another appointment. "This letter is an outright lie," he recounted, telling the doctor when he confronted her. "You lied to the surgeon and said I exceeded the standards of care. But the standards of care said I should have taken 2 or 3 therapist evaluations, and I only talked to one." Fitz said the doctor responded by telling him that she wanted to ensure he wouldn't be denied the operation because she knew he couldn't afford a therapist, and suggested the therapy or the surgery for his own benefit. Fitz told the Journal he now wishes he had a recording of their conversation. He said the doctor then got up and left the room and returned with a signed document. He said the doctor brandished the consent waiver he signed and reminded him that he was warned about the potential for adverse effects caused by the treatments. At first, Fitz said he didn't recognize the form because many years had passed since he had last seen it. Then he realized it was his informed consent document that he had signed in 2006. The form wasn't included in his medical records when he requested to see them because it had been filed in his administrative records, which he does not have access to. So they get you to sign this paper, and then they put it away where you can never see it or find it, and then only they produce it when you start calling them out, he explained. It's for their benefit. It's a defense for them. Suicidal ideation sets in amid the devastation. The weight of what had transpired and the years of deception summarily hit Fitz. Extremely depressed and in agony, he imagined and researched ways to kill himself, wondering how he might cause his death in a relatively painless way. He thought he might travel to Canada and try to fall asleep in a snowdrift, or maybe swim out in the Pacific Ocean and drown himself. He sank even deeper into despair and thought he should maybe destroy his entire body, ashamed his family would discover what he had done if his body was ever recovered. Perhaps then the best course was to try and have some kind of contraption crush him under a heavy object, or maybe self-immolate by flying to Hawaii and jumping into a volcano, he remembered thinking. Fitz also considered taking the leftover pain meds his doctor had prescribed and acquire a gun and kill himself in front of his doctor at the next Pride Parade, because his doctor always had a booth at the event pushing transgender medicine and surgeries. Maybe offing himself in such a fashion could make an unignorable political point and stun the doctor, he said. He said he had it all planned out, but it ultimately balked. Fitz said he attempted suicide once, opting to jump to his death from the balcony of his high-rise apartment, but it was foiled. His cat was looking like she was going to jump off with him, and he didn't want her to die, so he stepped back from the edge. But then he felt as though suicide was wrong entirely, and he should try to channel his anguish in a positive direction and use his painful experience to help other people in similar situations.